Hi there, my name is David McCormick. I'm a violinist, a Charlottesville native, and along with Loren Ludwig here, a 2020 Fellow of the International Center for Jefferson Studies. I'm also Artistic Director of Early Music Access Project.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Loren Ludwig. I'm a viola da gamba player and music scholar based in Baltimore, Maryland.
So Early Music Access Project is a rotating group of musicians. We play a wide range of early music. And within this range, we've done everything from a Baroque murder mystery concert to an event that featured meditation and medieval music. And one of our projects is the Jefferson Project, where we are, over a series of years, presenting music, the story of music at Monticello through virtual and in-person concerts, lectures, and special events. And we want to thank the International Center for Jefferson Studies for our wonderful fellowships that have given us an opportunity to study this music in depth. This afternoon's virtual concert examines a wide range of music played in Virginia during Jefferson's lifetime. And we're going to start in a very familiar place for many of you, two movements from a violin sonata by Antonio Vivaldi. A copy of these Opus 4 sonatas is found in the Monticello Music Collection housed at the University of Virginia. So, social dancing was enormously popular during Jefferson's lifetime. The minuet was perhaps the most popular dance of that time. And we're about to play 3 minuets that are found in a book from the Monticello music collection. Tunbridge, Calvert, and Fitzhugh are the name of the 3 minuets. This collection of minuets was stitched together from several different books of minuets. And Jefferson gave this book to his granddaughter, Virginia Randolph Jefferson. On one of the blank pages, someone, presumably Jefferson, it looks like his handwriting, has scribbled out Fitzhugh's minuet in his own handwriting. And Loren and I have come to believe that perhaps Jefferson is the composer of this minuet. And I think you'll hear for yourself that the 2 minuets that are from the actual collection sound very similar to this handwritten minuet. It's certainly plausible, with Jefferson being very well versed in music, that he could have written this minuet. There is no bass line in the minuet that Jefferson wrote, which would have made it easier to write. One curious fact that we noted, Fitzhugh, the dedicatee of the minuet, could be William Fitzhugh, with whom Jefferson stayed on his way to and from DC, and Fitzhugh was an amateur flute player. So all those are some things to consider. And I wanted to play for you just the opening couple of lines. Oh dear. The opening couple of lines of some of these minuets. Maybe Loren can do that for us.
Yes, so we have a string break. We play on gut strings. We play these, in this case, copies of Renaissance and Baroque instruments. And the strings are made of gut, and they are susceptible to the weather. So David is going to do an emergency, probably the fastest string change in history, we're hoping. And I'm going to play the melody of a couple of these the minuets that are in the book that are printed, and then a bit of Fitzhugh's minuet, so you can hear how similar they are. It seems likely that that Jefferson or somebody used these minuets as a basis for Fitzhugh's minuet. So here's the beginning of Calvert's minuet, which is one of the printed ones. And now here's Fitzhugh's minuet, the one that is in Jefferson's hand. At that point, the melodies diverge a bit, but there are a lot of sort of structural and harmonic similarities. There's kind of a lot of reasons to imagine that, and this was a very popular practice, right? That somebody would have a collection of music and would be inspired by pieces and would compose their own versions of things and either write them down or make them up. We're going to diverge here, and I'm going to play an unaccompanied, we're going to diverge from our plan, and I'm going to play an unaccompanied piece, a suite for viola da gamba from a recently discovered manuscript from outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. And the manuscript, I've named it the James River Music Book, and it has a whole bunch of pieces from the early 18th century, and then some pieces that were added over the years, over the course of the century, as the manuscript passed from hand to hand, and different musicians took possession of it and entered their tunes. But the earliest layer has in it several suites for solo viola da gamba, the instrument that I'm playing. And that's exciting to viola da gamba players, because this is the first known music that originates on this continent, that we know originates on this continent for this instrument. So prior to this, viola da gamba players had to sort of imagine what 18th century musicians might have played on the viola da gamba in the British colonies. But now we have some actual music. So I'm going to play one of these suites from the James River Music Book. And I'm going to tune first. You're back.
I'm back. I decided to put another string on so that we could play more music.
Good work.
Yeah. Shall we play some minuets?
Yes,
All
right. We are circling back to the minuets.
You may recall the thematic material that was very similar in these three.
Right. Tunbridge, Calvert, and Fitzhugh are the minuets, and we're going to tune again.
Thank you.
access. Okay, this next tune was one of Thomas Jefferson's favorites, according to his granddaughter Ellen. There are two versions in the Monticello music collection, one for solo piano and one for voice and piano. The version I'm about to play for you is by William McGibbon, and it's for violin. And so it's not exactly what Jefferson had in his collection, but it would have been, this arrangement would have been very popular during Jefferson's lifetime.
The next set we're going to play is a collection of dances, sort of a smorgasbord of dances that were circulating in 18th century Virginia. There was a lot of musical variety and musical diversity happening all over the colonies, and this captures a bit of that, we hope. We're going to start with a duo for viola da gamba and violin by Alfonso Ferrabosco II. Those that are fans of Renaissance English music may recognize that name. And this was circulating in a couple different copies in Virginia in the 18th century. We're going to follow that by a dance we found in a mid-century manuscript called Cannonade at Yorktown, Virginia. And it's really a fiddle tune. You'll recognize the idiom as a fiddle tune. I'm not sure if this tune had a later existence in the state. I'd be interested to know if there are any fiddle players out there that recognize this tune either by title or by sound. Following that, we're going to play a piece called Congo. And this is fascinating to us because it's one of the only surviving, potentially actual African dances that survives in notation from the 18th century. Some of you may be familiar with Congo Square in New Orleans, and that was the name given to that space because that was where dancing and music was happening. And it seems that the term Congo was used in the 18th century in the colonies to refer to dances, to African dances. So this piece either made its way from Africa, or it was composed by a person of African descent, or it was composed by a white person sort of trying to learn the idiom or imitate the idiom in some form. We don't know, but it's a distinctive and beautiful dance. And then we're going to end the set with the James River Minuet, which again is from the James River music book, from which my solo piece came a little while ago. And unlike the set of minuets we just played, this one is more of a Baroque minuet. It's a sort of earlier, it probably would have sounded a little fusty and old-fashioned to Jefferson. But in the decades that it was circulating, just sort of in the middle of the century, it was still au courant.
final set of tunes is a set of fiddle tunes that would have been played by Eston Hemings and his band. By now, you've probably figured out that Thomas Jefferson played the violin. What you may not know is that all three of his sons, with Sally Hemings, were also fiddle players. So we're going to play some tunes, three of which, or at least, well, two of which, we know for sure that Eston Hemings played. One is Lord MacDonald's Reel, which is a version of the Virginia Reel. Another is Money Musk, which we have written accounts of Eston having played that, and Thomas Jefferson actually wrote out Money Musk in one of his music books. So it's a piece that the two of them shared. We're going to start this set with Roger of Coverley, which was a traditional tune that ended an evening of dance. And we're also going to play Slaughterhouse for you, which is our best guess for a piece that's listed as Wesson's Slaughterhouse in an account of pieces that Eston played. So we'll play Roger of Coverley first, then Lord MacDonald's Reel, then Slaughterhouse, and then Money Musk. You're welcome to dance along at home. No one will ever know. All right, so now we have a question and answer period, and Brandon Dillard is going to be our moderator for this time. Brandon, what is your first question for us?
So for starters, guys, we're getting a lot of positive feedback. So from our online audience to you both, thank you so much for the music today. And tell us just a little bit more about the Early Music Access Project and how it got founded.
Sure thing. So Early Music Access Project has just finished up our third season. And as I mentioned at the start of this program, one of our goals is to sort of expand the boundaries of what it means to play early music. And also one of our goals is to be a vital part of the local musical culture here. That's why this Jefferson project has really been wonderful for us. We've played everything from medieval music, folk tunes for the Baroque era, like you just heard, from the Baroque era, I should say, opera arias, Bob Dylan tunes, and we've even played a Grateful Dead cover. Brandon, another question?
So here's one from online. Debbie wants to know what you think of the acoustics in the room.
This is a beautiful room to play in. Unsurprisingly, it's both visually spectacular, with the gardens, and I'm sure many of you have been here. It's just the right size and shape room for 18th century music. This is really the space that chamber music was imagined for. And Jefferson presumably knew that when he designed the house. He wanted to make a space that music would sound beautiful. So it's lovely to play in here, both for the sound and for the history. Brandon.
So you told us a bit about the viola da gamba, the violin. Can you tell us a little more about instruments during Jefferson's life? What was popular? What would he have heard?
There were many instruments at Monticello, and we recently met with the Monticello archaeology team and learned that they have uncovered dozens of jaw harps. Apparently that was the most popular instrument here in the 18th century, just in terms of sheer numbers, and was played by everybody. It was played by enslaved people, it was played by white folks that were working here. It may have been played for fun by some of the aristocrats that were on the place. There were banjos, there were fiddles, there were all different sorts of hand percussion and singing, of course. In Jefferson's collection of instruments, there were violins, there were keyboard instruments of various sorts. What about the violin?
Yeah, Jefferson, of course, played the violin and owned at least one, probably several violins, and including a kit violin, a pochette violin. I also wanted to mention that Jefferson was very eager to have an orchestra here at Monticello. He wanted clarinets and flutes and horns and all of that, and he never made that dream come true. But in the collection, you can see vestiges of that wish.
Another one?
So Scott's curious about the James River music book. Is that something that's available online or something that we can find?
The James River music book is, as I mentioned, is a recent discovery, and I've been researching it and writing about it in various forms. There's actually an article just out in Early Music America on the James River music book, and I'm going to be giving a talk on the James River music book, and it'll have some guest musical appearances by folks from the Early Music Access Project, in fact, and that's going to be on June 1st, next week at 4 p.m. So if you want to learn more, that's one place that you can come to join us for that.
So Andrew is curious if there are any particular challenges you find in preparing music from this period as opposed to other time periods.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the interesting challenges about telling the story of music at Monticello is that the music of the enslaved population isn't collected in volumes, the way Jefferson's collection is, and the way his daughter's and his wife's music is collected in volumes. And so we have to dig really deep to figure some of these things out. We have to read letters and newspaper articles from the time to sort of reconstruct. And one of the things that we've done is actually follow members of the Hemings family to Ohio and read about their activities there. Eston Hemings was a very popular band leader in Ohio, and because of some newspaper clippings from, I think actually after he died, we have a list of pieces that he played and we're able to reconstruct. Loren, do you want to add to that?
This is a really, as people that, we reconstruct past musical performance practices. We try to understand what instruments people used and how they thought about the music that they were playing and how they, the techniques they used to make it sound the way it sounded. Of course, we can't ever know what that music sounded like, but we can use research and various techniques to try to figure it out. In terms of this repertory of 18th century music, this is a really fun challenge for historical performers because there was so much different music happening at Monticello, for example. And, tunes coming from different traditions. We, in the sets we played, right, we had tunes that were coming from England and tunes coming from Ireland and Scotland and tunes presumably from the enslaved population and classical high art music and all different things. And so trying to figure out what performance practices to use from piece to piece and to kind of digest this really diverse and divergent set of pieces is a fun challenge for this.
And I should mention that it's also an interesting challenge to do all of that in the course of a 30-minute program, to have sort of the whiplash of styles.
So what's something you've learned by being part of the Early Music Access Project that you didn't know before?
Well, we have sort of unprecedented resources at our fingertips these days as fellows of the International Center for Jefferson Studies. We got to do 2 of our weeks in person and be around other scholars and ask lots of questions and go through volumes and volumes of information. And it's given us a lot of insight, I think, especially into the sound world at Monticello, visiting with the folks at archaeology and seeing the jaw harps, seeing fragments of a bird whistle, knowing that Jefferson was able to very accurately describe the sound of a banjo, and that we have violins and harpsichords and pianos in this very room. You can get a real sense of this sound world that you might not otherwise be aware of if you were just casually thinking about Jefferson and his music world.
I've been really interested to learn just how much music was happening at Monticello and in Virginia in the 18th century. And of course, those who have read Jefferson's writings will have noticed that he loves to talk about how little music is happening and how impoverished the music scene is. And he goes to Europe to collect all of this music and is trying to recruit European musicians and was really sort of towing this line about there not being that much music. In fact, there was a lot of music, and it's also fascinating to see how eager 18th century musicians in Virginia were to play with each other. There are letters and diaries that reveal these trips that people would take. They would visit each other's plantations or each other's towns and really make an effort to bring instruments and music with them and share music and talk about that. So that just the richness of that culture has been an exciting thing to learn about over the course of this project.
All right, and one last question. Tell us what's in store for the future for the project.
Sure. Well, our Jefferson project has taken an interesting turn in these times. There'll be lots of now virtual events, fellows forums through the International Center for Jefferson Studies here, and other online small-scale performances and things like that. I'd encourage folks to go to earlymusiccville.org and keep track of what's next for us. We're still reinventing what's next for us musically, but the research certainly continues.
It's been a real gift to get a chance to share this music with y'all, and we'd like to thank Monticello for hosting us And we'd like to thank the International Center for Jefferson Studies for supporting our research. And we'd really like to thank you all for joining us for this music from Jefferson's Music Room.
Yeah, thanks so much.